I think relevance is extremely important, both for the skill and the knowledge. So when we're talking about preschool through grade 12 education, are they learning a skill that they see is going to be valuable to them, a character skill? Hello, let's do that more often, a learning skill. And then is the knowledge that we're teaching them, beneficial? Do they believe that it is?
Do your kids ever come home from school and say that they had the most boring day ever? And they get really frustrated about their teacher and how their teacher's teaching. Or maybe you're homeschooling your kids and there's a reality that your kids just are bored by subjects. They don't really love it and the homework seems really hard. How should we respond to that, knowing that sometimes these boredom things actually build resilience, but it makes kids not really like school and they lose a love for reading or a love for learning? Sometimes as parents, that can put us in a dark place. But today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, Dr. Kathy attacks this, gives us some insight, and helps us reason and think well when we think our kids are doing well in school, but maybe they're bored and totally disinterested and wanting to check out. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
Dr. Kathy, a recent Brookings Institution survey found that by the age of 13, only a third of kids were enthusiastic about school, while parents estimated the number to be twice as high. Jenny Anderson and Rebecca Winthrop, they're authors of the book, The Disengaged Teen. They argue that not only does boring and stressing our kids in the name of education matter, it has suddenly started to matter in a particularly urgent way. Rebecca Winthrop notes, quote, "But I think the consequences of disengagement are far different than they used to be. There's always been a gap between what kids learn in school and what happens in the real world, but the gap has become a chasm. Kids are feeling it. They feel this tremendous stress to perform at something, but it doesn't feel meaningful because it isn't preparing them well." End quote. Dr. Kathy, why does practicality and what kids learn in school change what they think about learning?
If it's not practical, we might as well not be here. I mean, I think even young kids begin to think about the usefulness of what they're learning. And this is a big problem I've seen in education, even all the way back to when I taught second graders. There were very many things that we did in school that they would never do outside of school. Like one of the examples I often use is, when's the last time that you read an article and circled the best heading? No, we read the heading and decide whether or not to read the article. But you don't read an article and then circle the best heading or the best title. But is that a skill to teach children? Yes, but then why? Why do you want them to know that skill? This is the big question. One of the stories I love to tell is a kid who was learning about compound words and went to the bakery with his mom and saw the word cupcake and went nuts. Mommy, mommy, there's a compound word over there. Cupcake, it's two words in one. And he got a cupcake as a gift. But that's a kid who had learned something in school and then saw that it was real in life. And this is what's essential. Wayne, when you and I do teacher training or parent education, or we've recently had the privilege of teaching pastors, we make sure that what we're teaching is something they will need. And we make sure that we have practical, try this on Monday, do this in about a week and see what happens. Because otherwise, even mature adults are going to veg out and think, what she doesn't know what she's talking about, or that's interesting but not relevant. I think relevance is extremely important, both for the skill and the knowledge. So when we're talking about preschool through grade 12 education, are they learning a skill that they see is going to be valuable to them, a character skill? Hello, let's do that more often, a learning skill. And then is the knowledge that we're teaching them, beneficial? Do they believe that it is?
Dr. Kathy, that's incredibly important. I just think that I need to be more excited about cupcakes. Words like cookie, I don't know, Cookie Monster just seems to make that a compound word. So I want to try that with my wife next time we're out and see if it works. But
Yeah, let me know.
yeah, I want to ask you this too. Is our kids' attitudes and impressions about learning, is that really important? I mean, there's days where I go to work and not here at Celebrate Kids. Before I worked here with you, when I
Thank
would be
you.
like, "Oh man, this is a little bit of a drag, but I got to do it." And I had built those muscles to do things I didn't really care to do at school, right? So, is our kids' impression about school really important for them? What do you think about that?
First of all, that was hysterical. What people don't know is that when we record these podcasts, we're looking at each other in a virtual room. And, I knew how you were gonna finish that sentence. I'm like, "Don't even say that out loud, like, you love working here." And yet, I know that yesterday was a day that was not your favorite day. You did it unto the Lord, and you were respectful, and it was a paperwork day, and you would much rather be editing and video podcasting and, helping with our book projects and any number of things, getting the next booking, and you were working in the paperwork, and I loved that you were willing to do that. So what was the question? Let's see. Should we be concerned about kids being, bored or stressed? Oh, yes. The dropout rate from our public schools is about 6,000 kids a day dropping out of school because there's a variety of reasons. Some kids are physically unwell and they just don't finish a year. Some kids relocate geographically and the parents don't re-enroll them and they're counted as a dropout, even though they might have chosen a charter school, a private school, or a homeschool. But the dropout rate is huge, and it's because they think it's irrelevant. If you dig into the research, we should do that broadcast sometime, maybe Wayne. But a lot of it is this: I don't need this, and they drop out and they go earn a GED and they change the world, or they think they're going to change the world. So bored and stressed in school, maybe this is why they don't know how to launch out of high school. Many of them can't imagine 4 more years of this. What they don't know, of course, is that good college experiences will be very different from a high school experience. So yes, let's be concerned. When they're bored and stressed, they look to be not that, right? So they turn to the endorphins of social media or gaming or even risky, horrific behaviors. I think that's a real reality. And I want to speak something into this, Wayne. What people might not know is what the research is telling us about the future of our high school students. About let me think, about 2/3 of them, at least, I bet, will work a job that doesn't yet exist. And many of them know that. They've seen the speed of change. I would not want to be a teacher today in the traditional sense. I think it must be extremely difficult to know that you're teaching students skills and content that may prove to not even be relevant by the time they graduate and are looking for a post high school career or educational experience. And we also know that they're going to have maybe 6 or 7 careers in a lifetime, according to George Barna's research, not jobs, but careers. So the educational system is supposed to be preparing our children for a huge variety because of the speed of change and the very big unknown. And I think a lot of our kids are intuitive enough. They want to be entrepreneurs, they want to be YouTube stars, if you will, so many of them. And they're looking at this math sheet or this physics problem or this, quote unquote boring English paper thinking, I've got AI and I've got, Google, and I'm not going to have to do this. I think it's a really big challenge.
Dr. Kathy, it makes me wonder a little bit about our attitudes kind of with school and how kids then kind of look at things. I don't know if we need to like dress our kids up in more muted tones so they're ready for all of the things because I don't know if they should just have this outlook that sometimes things are hard. I mean, I think
Yes.
that there's the on the flip side of that, I think that there's this pressure for us to make everything fun in culture. I don't know if you noticed this, but there's some new data points that show that Gen Z really wants to become social media influencers. It was actually like one of the top uh, careers that people had picked to the rate of about 60% of Gen Z marked down that they would like to be a social media influencer. And I don't know if that's just because social media influencers look like they're always having fun. And as
Mhm.
parents, we always think that having fun is an important part of being a kid. My kids should have fun today. What did we do that was fun? Did they enjoy playing in the sandbox? Did they have a good time at the park? Now, as they get older, did you enjoy that thing that you did? And so we get them things like games that make
Mhm.
things kind of fun. And a lot of their life ends up revolving around this. And then we make them go to school and it's like everything goes back to black and white. They have
Uh,
to read books and they have to kind of look at history. I mean, is there something to making education a part of the actual world that we've kind of trained them in, where education ends up being fun because the family's been fun? Should we make education fun? Or what should kind of the purpose of education be? Is it to have it mirror or mimic what we kind of celebrate in our families?
oh, it's so rich. The study that you're talking about here, these women wrote the book, The Disengaged Teen. I would go on record to say that engagement is a high priority for me in education. Even when I teach, even on our podcast, I pray that we're coming across with enthusiasm, with topics that matter to our listeners, and so they'll be engaged, and it won't be hard for them to, hang on every word, if you will. When I teach, whether it's at a homeschool conference later this week, a pastor's conference last week, I want to teach in such a way that it is easy for people to learn. So engagement is a huge priority. that it would be valuable, that people would be curious. We've got to help our kids be curious about what's going on in the world. I think a goal of fun isn't realistically possible 24/7, 365, or even, 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day at school. We send our kids off to school, go have fun today. And then the kids by noon, they haven't had any fun because they think of fun as, games and activity. The spelling words could be fun if the teacher made it more engaging. And some of them have done an excellent job at that. But the kids don't see that as fun. So then they think the school day was a bad day. So I think, we've got to be careful in the language that we send them off to school with. When we talk to them at the end of the day, what was fun today? No, no, no. What were you curious about? What was very interesting? What did you pay attention to and you wish the teacher would have kept talking? Which child did you notice who was lonely? Did you help out? When did you struggle and what did you do with that? Did you get help or did you hide in your shame? Like, let's talk about an appropriate response to struggle. Hey, Bethany, when were you bored today? You probably were. You're a bright kid. You like to think quickly, and your teacher has 27 other kids. So when were you bored and how did you handle that? And wouldn't it be sweet, Wayne, if we taught them that that is how the world works? There are going to be boring days. The red light, the train stop, the dentist office, and yes, a job that has days that are less fulfilling than other days. And I think we want our children to handle that well, right? You still are respectful. Like, character is who you are, not what you do. So you still show respect. You still choose to be engaged. Why? Because that honors the people who are in the room with you. And I hope that's coming across okay. This is not easy.
Man, I love this conversation that Dr. Kathy and I had the opportunity to have today. It reminds me of the passage that comes out of 1 Samuel chapter 17, and I'll begin reading at verse 32. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from when he was young." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from my flock, I went after it. I struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair. I struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Before becoming a renowned king of Israel, David spent years shepherding sheep. It's a humble and difficult job involving a lot of isolation, boredom, and some occasional dangers. In ancient Israel, shepherding was really considered a low status job, but it still demanded a lot of discipline and vigilance, resourcefulness. When the giant Goliath threatened Israel, David confidently approached King Saul, asserting that his difficult experiences shepherding sheep had really prepared him for this battle that was almost insurmountable and had incredible odds. David declared that overcoming lions and bears while guarding his sheep gave him the courage and skills necessary to defeat Goliath. It's important for us in these moments to talk to our kids when they're engaging maybe something that's seemingly boring or mundane. Using what happened with David can really give them courage to go and face these little tasks today because they're building tiny muscles. Studying math or grammar are really preparing our kids for future victories and helping them become strong problem solvers. David's shepherding days might have felt repetitive and even uneventful, and yet God used them to cultivate courage, patience, and resourcefulness. Those are skills that transformed him into a wise and courageous leader. I wonder what God is doing in your kids' lives, especially as they're engaging subjects or school or even reading assignments that just feel boring and that actually don't seem to have any application to real life. Sometimes God uses that to cultivate some different cross training that's going to prepare our kids for something dynamic later on in their life. And so maybe as parents, rather than coming to their aid, we need to come to their coaching and encourage them to keep going. I hope that's an encouragement for you, and I hope this whole podcast is an encouragement for you. I want to remind you that today is Masterpiece Monday, which means that we are celebrating our friends who are working at creating a masterpiece. What they do is dynamic. They give incredible insight and different teachings for kids to really awaken picture smarts and art and a creative mind by using art training to guide them through different art projects. This is a fantastic way to introduce art, especially as you're looking into the summer where your kids might be bored or may not have a ton of extra work to do. Taking a couple of these classes can really knock out some really projects, but also build some great muscles and awaken some picture smarts inside of them. I encourage you to check it out. Just go to creatingamasterpiece.com. Again, that's creatingamasterpiece.com. Well, now on behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. We're so glad you're joining us this week, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.